giant piece of ice broke off from an Antarctic ice shelf, revealing an ecosystem on the seafloor that has never been accessible to humans.
A piece of ice the size of an entire American city just tore itself off Antarctica. Scientists rushed to the site within days and sent cameras down there. What came back stopped everyone on that ship completely cold. A fully built world, thriving in a place that should have been empty. Mysterious creatures that had never once seen sunlight. A suspected new species nobody has ever named. What was living down there should not have been possible, and what it means for the rest of this planet is something scientists are still struggling to say out loud. The impossible world. A piece of ice the size of an entire American city just tore itself off the bottom of the world. And what it left behind should not have been alive.
Scientists have been concerned for some time about this.
There's another one here.
There's another one to the left.
On January 13th, 2025, a slab of ice named A84 broke away from the George VI ice shelf in Antarctica. NASA satellites caught the whole thing happening from space, watching this enormous mass slide free and start drifting through the cold currents below. It was 19 miles long and 11 miles wide, over 500 square kilometers of solid ice, all at once, cut loose from the frozen coast it had clung to for who knows how long. Try to picture that. This was not some chunk of ice, but a moving landmass big enough that you could lay an entire American city across it and still have room left over. But the iceberg itself was never the real story. It was what the iceberg had been sitting on top of. When A84 pulled away, it uncovered 209 square miles of seafloor that had not touched sunlight, fresh nutrients, or anything from the world above. In possibly hundreds of years, that ground had been buried in permanent darkness for so long that no human alive had any idea what was down there, or whether anything could even survive in a place like that. As it happened, a research ship called the Falkor 2 was already working nearby in the Bellingshausen Sea. The crew hadn't planned on being anywhere close to this, but ice had been blocking their intended route and forcing them into a smaller patch of ocean than they wanted. When word reached them that a piece of Antarctica the size of a city had just broken free, they didn't hesitate. The lead scientist on board, Patricia Esquite, would later describe the moment plainly. The decision was immediate, she said, and the entire mission changed course within days, chasing a hole in the ice shelf that had only just opened up. 12 days after the calving, the ship reached the site. Think about what that means. 12 days, and they were standing over ground that no human being had ever laid eyes on, sealed away for longer than anyone could put a number to. They lowered a robot called Sebastian down into the black water with cameras built to survive crushing pressure and total darkness. And when those lights finally switched on over the seafloor, nobody on that ship expected what came back. They expected nothing. Maybe a stretch of bare rock or a few scattered signs of life clinging on at the edges. What they got instead was a fully built world, thriving in a place that should have been empty for centuries. The first things the cameras found were sponges, some of them nearly a meter tall. That might not sound alarming until you understand how slowly these creatures grow, less than 2 centimeters a year. Do the math on a sponge that size, and you're looking at something that has been sitting in that exact spot, untouched, for decades, maybe far longer. Then the cameras kept moving, and the discoveries kept coming. An octopus resting completely still more than 1,100 meters down, in water pressure heavy enough to crush a block of solid steel. Ice fish drifting past, their blood carrying a kind of natural antifreeze that lets them survive water cold enough to kill almost anything else. Sea spiders crawling across the rocks, some of them as wide as a dinner plate, moving through a world that had never seen a single ray of light. And then the camera caught something that made the entire crew go quiet. It was a giant phantom jellyfish drifting slowly through the frame, its body alone stretched more than a meter wide. From it hung 4 long, ribbon-like arms, trailing behind it for over 10 meters, 33 feet of tentacle, moving through black water that had been shut off from the rest of the ocean for longer than anyone on that ship could confirm. It looked less like an animal and more like something escaped from a world that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. To understand how big this moment really was, you have to go back to 2021. That year, a different team of scientists drilled a narrow hole through another Antarctic ice shelf, hoping to catch some tiny glimpse of what might be underneath. What they found was one single creature, stuck to one single boulder, visible through one narrow tunnel of light. That was the entire picture science had of life under Antarctic ice. One animal, one rock, and one tiny window. This time was different. This time, humans didn't get a keyhole, they got the whole room. And that should stop you cold, because of how little we actually know about what's under our own oceans. Right now, human eyes and human cameras have physically seen less than 0.001% of the deep sea floor on this entire planet. Less than 1/1000th of 1%. To put that into perspective, that's an area roughly the size of the state of Rhode Island, out of an ocean floor that covers most of the Earth. We have better maps of the surface of Mars than we do of the ground beneath our own oceans. If a fully built, ancient world was sitting quietly under one patch of Antarctic ice this whole time, waiting for a single lucky break to be found, you have to ask what else is sitting under the other 99.999% we've never even looked at. And here's the part that should really unsettle you. This has already happened before, and almost nobody remembers it. Back in 2002, another massive chunk of Antarctica, the Larsen B ice shelf, suddenly broke apart. This wasn't some fragile, unstable piece of ice either. It had held steady for the entire 12,000-year stretch of human civilization, through every war, every empire, every invention we've ever made. Then it shattered in just over a month. And when scientists went down to look at what it had been hiding, they found almost the exact same thing all over again. A hidden world, alive in total darkness, thriving where nothing should have been able to survive at all. Two different ice shelves, decades apart, both hiding the same impossible secret underneath them. So, this wasn't a fluke but a pattern, which means the real question isn't just what these creatures are. It's how something so alive managed to survive in a place with no sunlight, no warmth, and no way in from the outside world for centuries at a time. Because the deeper you look at what's actually keeping this ecosystem going, the more it starts to feel like everything we thought we understood about the rules of life on this planet might be wrong. The rules that don't apply. Every rule scientists have ever written down about the deep sea says this exact spot should have been a graveyard. Instead, it was full of life, and nobody standing on that ship could tell you how. Think about how deep sea life is supposed to work almost everywhere else on the planet. Sunlight hits the surface of the ocean. Plants and tiny organisms use that light to grow. Some of them die, and their remains sink slowly down through the water, drifting for miles like a constant gentle snowfall of food, all the way to the bottom. Everything down there survives off of that endless supply falling from above. That's the deal. That's how it's always worked. No light, no snowfall, no food, no life. But this ecosystem had been shut off from every part of that system for centuries. No sunlight ever touched it. No plants ever grew above it that could rain down and feed it. Nothing dropped in from the surface world. Not for years, not for decades, possibly not for hundreds of years in a row. And somehow, none of that mattered. A living, growing, fully built world existed anyway, right where nothing should have been able to survive at all. That single fact should worry scientists more than almost anything else this discovery revealed, because it means the basic model researchers have used for decades to explain what life needs might be wrong, or at the very least, badly incomplete. Every theory about deep sea survival has been built around the same assumption, that food always comes from above, falling down from a sunlit world far overhead. This ecosystem didn't follow that rule. It didn't need to. And if one hidden world can break a rule scientists treat it as fixed, it raises an uncomfortable question about how many other rules we've gotten wrong too. And the deeper the team looked, the stranger it got. Down in the sediment, hidden from the cameras at first glance, they found entire communities of microbes that nobody had ever documented before. Tiny organisms were living on the surfaces of the coral and the sponges, forming their own miniature colonies. Unlike anything already cited in any scientific record, none of it matched what had been cataloged anywhere else on Earth. It was as if this single patch of frozen seafloor had built its own private version of life, disconnected from everything scientists thought they understood. Then came something even harder to explain. Buried in a sample pulled from the seafloor, researchers found what looks like a brand new species of isopod, a small crawling creature that may not exist anywhere else on this planet. Not a variation of something known, not a rare version of an existing species. Something new, something science has never given a name to before. And here's the part that should really sit with you. Everything the cameras filmed, the sponges, the jellyfish, the sea creatures crawling across the rocks, might only be the visible surface of something much bigger. Every food chain needs a foundation, some source of energy at the very bottom that everything else depends on to survive. Right now, nobody knows what that foundation actually is here. The animals on camera might just be the top layer of a system whose real engine is still completely hidden, buried somewhere in that sediment, unidentified and unexplained. Which means this community of creatures had to solve a problem that no laboratory has ever tested, that no computer simulation has ever modeled, and that no other ecosystem on this entire planet has ever had to face. They found a way to survive using rules that have never once been written down in any scientific paper, anywhere, by anyone. This isn't the first time something like this has gone terribly wrong before we even understood what we were looking at. Back in 2012, a group of Russian scientists finally broke through into Lake Vostok, a massive lake buried under almost 2.5 miles of solid Antarctic ice. That lake had likely been sealed off from the rest of the world for millions of years, untouched, unseen, completely cut off from everything above it. To reach it, the team used a special drilling fluid, even though scientists around the world had warned, loudly and repeatedly, that the fluid itself could contaminate whatever was down there. When researchers later announced they had found bacteria in samples from near the lake, nobody could actually confirm what they were looking at. Was it truly ancient life, untouched for millions of years? Or was it simply contamination, introduced by the very drill that broke through to reach it? To this day, no one can say for certain. We may have broken into a world that had survived untouched for millions of years, and in doing so, destroyed our only chance of ever knowing the truth about what was really living inside it. That same fear is sitting right now, quietly, over everything just discovered under A84. Marine biologists have been warning for years that deep-sea creatures are disappearing before science ever gets the chance to study them, let alone name them. Most of that destruction comes from mining and other damage happening in parts of the ocean that have never even been properly mapped. Recovery can take centuries. Sometimes it never happens at all, which means it is entirely possible that the exact isopod filmed beneath this vanished ice shelf could disappear forever before a single scientist ever gets the chance to give it an official name. So, the real mystery here was never just about how strange this life looks on camera. It's about what has actually been feeding it, keeping it alive, keeping it growing for centuries, in a place that should never have been able to support anything at all. And the deeper scientists dig for that answer, the darker it starts to look. The hidden lifeline. The thing that sealed this world away from the sun for centuries may be the exact same thing that had been quietly keeping it alive. Here's what scientists think is happening, though nobody can say it for certain yet. When ice from the George VI ice shelf melts, it doesn't just vanish, it carries things with it. Tiny bits of organic material, dissolved nutrients, all mixed into that melted water as it moves. And instead of that meltwater rising up and washing out to open ocean, some of it may have been sliding sideways, underneath the ice shelf itself, straight into the sealed world below, not falling down from above like every other deep-sea ecosystem depends on, moving sideways, from the very ice that was blocking out the sun. Right now, that's only a theory. Nobody has proven it. The team pulled up long tubes of sediment from the seafloor, layer after layer packed together like pages in a book, hoping those samples would finally confirm what's actually been feeding this place for so long. Those samples are still being studied. Until that work is done, this remains an idea scientists believe might be true, not a fact anyone can point to with certainty. But if it turns out to be true, then something about this discovery becomes almost impossible to sit with comfortably, because that would mean the same 500 feet of ice that sealed this world away from sunlight, away from human eyes, away from everything for centuries, was also the one thing keeping it fed the entire time. Its prison and its only source of food were the exact same wall of ice. The thing trapping it in darkness may have been the thing letting it survive the darkness at all. Which means the moment that ice broke free and drifted away, the scientists standing on that ship may have been documenting two things at once without even realizing it: a discovery and a death sentence, happening in the very same instant. This wouldn't even be the first time. An idea like this has completely upended what scientists believed about life. Back in 1977, a small group of researchers exploring the ocean floor near the Galapagos Islands stumbled onto something nobody expected to find: life, thriving in complete darkness, powered entirely by chemical energy instead of sunlight. No plants, no light, just chemistry alone, keeping an entire ecosystem alive. That discovery permanently changed what biologists thought life actually required to exist. And what's sitting under the ice near Antarctica right now might be the cold, frozen cousin of that exact same shock. A second version of the same impossible answer, discovered decades later on the opposite side of the planet. Think about what that actually means for the creatures living down there. They aren't feeding off nutrients drifting down from above, the way almost every other creature in the deep ocean does. They're feeding off something moving sideways through total darkness, pulled in from the edges instead of falling from the sky. No other food web studied anywhere else on Earth depends on that direction. These animals have been growing, reproducing, and building entire communities with absolutely no connection to the sunlight-powered system that keeps almost every other living thing on this planet alive. And here's where the fear stops being theoretical and becomes something we've already watched happen once before. When the Larsen B ice shelf broke apart back in 2002, scientists rushed to study the world it had been hiding, and at first, what they found looked like a miracle, a thriving ecosystem, alive without ever seeing the sun. But they didn't just find it thriving. They watched it start to die, in real time, during the very same expedition. The same collapse that had exposed this hidden world was already burying it. Sediment and debris, shaken loose by the very event that revealed it, began smothering the delicate mats and shelled creatures living there, creatures that had survived completely undisturbed for over 10,000 years. Discovery and destruction happening together, inside the exact same event. So here's where this leaves us. Nobody can confirm, not yet, what has truly been keeping this Antarctic ecosystem alive all this time. And even if scientists eventually prove the meltwater theory correct, that answer comes with a brutal complication attached to it. Because if the ice really was the lifeline all along, then the thing feeding this world for centuries is now gone, drifting off into open ocean, and there's no way of knowing whether whatever is left down there can survive without it. And this isn't some rare, isolated mystery tucked away in one lonely corner of Antarctica that nobody else will ever have to think about again. This is happening as part of something enormous, something already unfolding right now across the entire frozen continent, on a scale that stretches far beyond one patch of exposed seafloor. What's happening under the ice near George VI is only one piece of a much bigger pattern, one that could eventually reach coastlines on every continent on Earth. The dying world. This ecosystem may already be dying, and what happens next in Antarctica could dwarf everything you've just heard. For as long as this world existed, it survived on three things staying exactly the same. The temperature stayed constant, the darkness stayed total, the currents kept moving in the same predictable patterns, year after year, century after century. Every one of those three things is now falling apart at once, in real time, while the world watches. Sunlight is touching this seafloor for the first time in possibly hundreds of years. The water around it is warming, and as that massive iceberg keeps drifting further from shore, it's dragging the currents around it into completely different patterns. Patterns this ecosystem has never once had to survive before. That's why the scientists on that ship didn't waste a single day. They pulled up sediment cores and gathered every biological sample they possibly could, working as fast as they could manage because they understood something the rest of us are only now catching up to. This world, exactly as they found it, might never exist again. Whatever they didn't manage to record in those few short days on site could be gone completely the next time anyone comes back to look. Think about what that actually means for the creatures they filmed, but never got the chance to properly study. That suspected new species of isopod, pulled from the seafloor and still waiting to be formally confirmed, could disappear entirely before science ever finishes giving it a name. Every strange organism caught on camera, but never sampled, never tested, never logged into any official record, could vanish the same way. Discovered and lost within the same short window of time, undone by the very event that let anyone find them in the first place. And this isn't some rare, freak accident happening once. in one lonely corner of the planet. Ice shelves across the Antarctic Peninsula are cracking apart more often now, as the entire region keeps losing ice to a planet that keeps getting warmer. This particular discovery only happened because one research ship was already close enough and lucky enough to reach the site within days. Most of the time, when a piece of ice this size breaks free somewhere along that coastline, there's no ship anywhere nearby, no cameras, no scientists racing to look before it's too late. Just an ancient world, exposed and unraveling, completely alone. And if you think what's happening near George VI sounds serious, what's happening at another glacier not far away should genuinely frighten you. Scientists have started calling it the Doomsday Glacier. Its real name is Thwaites, and on its own, it holds enough ice to raise sea levels across the entire planet by more than 2 feet if it fully collapses. Researchers with the British Antarctic Survey have been watching cracks spread across the base of its last remaining support shelf, the one structure still holding it in place, and in less than a year, that cracking has roughly doubled. Some scientists are now warning that this shelf could start breaking apart as soon as 2026. If that happens, glaciologists fear it won't stop there. Thwaites could act like the first domino, dragging the glaciers around it down with it, destabilizing the entire ice sheet across West Antarctica. If that ever happens, we aren't just talking about one hidden ecosystem being lost. We're talking about coastlines changing on every inhabited continent on Earth. While all of this unfolds down here, the search for answers to an even bigger question is already underway, far above our heads. NASA launched a spacecraft called Europa Clipper back in October of 2024, sending it on a journey toward one of Jupiter's icy moons. That spacecraft won't even arrive until 2030. And even once it gets there, it isn't designed to detect life directly. All it can do is check whether the basic ingredients life would need are actually present. If it finds exactly what scientists are hoping for, humanity would still need an entirely separate mission just to go and look for anything living there. The same uncertainty hanging over this frozen seafloor in Antarctica, the not knowing, the waiting, the years it takes just to get partial answers, could end up defining our search for life on that distant moon for decades to come. But here's the piece of this story that changes everything, something that has never been proven on Earth until right now. If life can survive for centuries, sealed away in complete darkness, with no sunlight and no warmth and no way in from the outside world, then the possibility of an ocean like that existing somewhere else in our solar system stops being just an idea scientists like to imagine. It becomes something backed by real evidence, sitting right here on our own planet. This doesn't prove that Europa has life waiting under its ice. Nobody can claim that. But for the first time ever, we have solid proof that being sealed away in total darkness does not automatically mean life is impossible. That single idea alone could change where humanity decides to look for the rest of our lives. And that's what makes this story so hard to shake. We may have just watched the final days of a world that had been alive and hidden since long before any of us were born. And the only reason any of us will ever know that world existed at all is because we happened to be there the exact moment it started to disappear.